Okay, so in this next video, which is part 2 of my morning with Magnus Walker, the Porsche institution, the guru that all of us know very, very well for his collection of Porsches. I go on a tour of that collection from his 914s through his transactional cars like 944s, his 94 Carrera GT, 968s, 928s, and so on. But obviously, importantly, also his 911s from his 930 turbos, 2.7 MF5s, his S's, and vitally, of course, his 277, probably one of the most famous 911s on the planet. So we talk about those. We go through his wonderful 20,000 square foot warehouse that houses that collection in the middle of the LA Arts District. And we talk a lot. We look at the collection in detail. But then we also talk about some of the cars in his collection that are not Porsches. And it might surprise you to learn that Magnus Walker is not just a Porsche guy. So here it is, part 2 of me and my morning in LA with Magnus Walker.
So, all about variety.
Yeah, Corvettes, an E-Type.
These are C3 Corvettes. So chrome bumper 69, Gen 1 C3 4-speed. Gen 2 C3 77, different bumpers, auto. Series 3 V12 2+2 automatic, the unloved E-Type Jag.
Yeah.
89 V12 XJS Jag.
And I'd like to talk a bit more about XJS in a minute, if we can.
And then I got a couple of old vintage Rolls Royces.
And do you use everything? Do you use every car?
Yeah, I mean, I try to. You know, some get used more than others. You know, this is new car fever, the C3 Corvette. So this gets used. And as you can see, I've got this same dirt don't slow you down. Things don't need to be shiny.
Is this as you bought it?
Yeah, I haven't done anything to it.
And what was the inspiration behind this? Just you love an American muscle car, or just Corvette?
You know, as a kid growing up, I watched a lot of American TV. You know, Starsky and Hutch, Rockford Files,
Chips.
Dukes of Hazzard, Chips, Kojak. So it was Americana.
Cool, yeah.
So, you know, that's what brought me to LA, sex, drugs, rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
It was, like you say, Evel Knievel, Captain America, everything else we just talked about. So I'm all about variety.
Was your dad a car guy?
Yeah, my dad was a car guy. You know, we grew up working class in Sheffield. We didn't actually own any cool cars, but my dad was a car guy. We used to watch a lot of motorsports. We'd go to events at Mallory Park, Donington Park, Cadwell Park.
What did he drive?
Well, he had a company car, so it all depends what company he was with at the time.
Right, okay.
So, you know, it was...
But nothing as exciting as he would like to have had?
No, my uncle, who was pretty successful, had the cool cars. My uncle David, he had a fiberglass Ferrari. Well, he actually had a Ferrari Dino, which he then traded into a 75 fiberglass 308 GTB, of which they didn't make many. That was the first year. But going back years before that, my uncle David and my dad built a Lotus Type 47 in my uncle David's garage.
Wow.
So we didn't have cool cars, but, you know, growing up in the 70s in England, we watched a lot of motorsports.
Yeah.
You know, obviously 70s, 7, we had James Hunt, Barry Sheehan, Formula One, Superbike World Champion. So I was around motorsports quite a lot.
So you had a lot of inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, 70s was a great time. A lot of my inspiration is 60s and 70s inspired.
Hence this. Wow. So do you ever stop buying?
No.
You're just going to keep going?
Yeah.
But again, without a plan, but on the basis that if something comes up that you like and you think, yeah, I'd like one of those, then you just keep going.
That was how I fell into the Corvette.
Yeah.
You know, things come to me like that 924 Carrera GT came to me. You know, that's a $5,000 99 Gen 2 996.
I remember seeing a video about that. Did it have an engine thing, or you fixed the engine?
No,
really
I haven't
simply?
done anything to that car. I was actually looking for a Gen 1 996 Aero kit car because we never got the GT3 here in the States.
One of the most unloved and underrated Porsches in existence, the 996.
Well, yes and no. You can't have a conversation without people talking about that and, you know, IMS. Mm-hmm. Both of which are sort of irrelevant in the big picture. When you're driving it, you don't see those headlights. You know, if you've got a 993 GT1 with similar headlights, no one cares about that.
Yeah.
But when it's on a 996, you know, fried eggs, people hate on it.
Because it was such a departure from the 993, I guess. I mean, I remember I was selling Porsches new when the 993 was deleted and they started introducing the 996, and customers thought it was too much of a departure. Not just water-cooled, but yeah, the headlamps too. But now I think it's becoming a car that people are starting to love.
Yeah, I mean, part of the issue there really is, 968 front fender, real similar to 993 front fender if we come in here. But part of the problem back in the day, when the Gen 1 996 came out, 25 years ago, with Porsche's cross-branding, money-saving tactics, same as a Boxster.
Yeah.
So it's not just...
But lots of commonality of parts, you mean?
Well, this is my whole thing. It's not just ragging on this design here. It's also, this is a Boxster front.
Which was half the price.
Right. So this is Porsche being thrifty.
Yeah.
Porsche's an extremely successful company, as we all know, but they're extremely thrifty.
Yeah. And
they're trying to save money by spreading across the platform. As much as I love my top-of-the-line 10-year-old 991 Turbo S, there's a lot of annoying things about it.
Yeah.
It has the exact same Mickey Mouse 5-cent plastic switches that activate the window.
Plastic dash, plastic...
As the Boxster.
Yeah.
And these things break.
Yeah.
Now, we were talking earlier on about other automotive brands, Aston Martin, for example, right? Their switches are, custom knurled.
Yeah, billet aluminium.
Yeah, Porsche's just pulling part spins from the same switch they put on a Boxster. So if you're spending all the money in the world to get the top of the line branded turbo whatever, you'd expect something different.
Yeah.
It's like my rant, my favorite rant. I'm all about turbos. At one time I had 7 of them. That's the first year 75 turbo. Porsche made 284 cars.
So these are 3-litre 930s, right?
3-litre 930s.
Yeah.
I had 7 of them at one time, 75, 6, and 7. I'm now down to 3, but that's...
You only have 3, Magnus.
This one here is the first US production turbo ever sold. Rest of the world got the turbo in 75, badged as turbo.
US in 76, yeah?
US market, this is the first US turbo ever sold. They badged them Turbo Carreras.
Yeah.
You're a marketing guy. Porsche had missed out on a US spec 73 RS Carrera. It didn't come here.
It became the RS America, right?
Well,
which was a pale version of the RS.
Yeah, but that's, 964, like we're talking 20 years later.
Yeah.
Let's focus here, 1976. Porsche marketing people thought, to sell the turbo, we have to call it a Turbo Carrera because people know about the 73 RS Carrera. Things haven't changed. Let me ask you a question. Does a Taycan turbo have a turbocharger in it?
No, because it's an EV.
So why is it badged turbo?
For marketing purposes.
And what is that purpose?
The purpose is to make the buyer think that there is something even more special. The turbo is the kind of the further exaggeration and accentuation of the classic model, right?
So it's no longer forced induction of an internal combustion engine through turbocharging to make more power?
No, how can it be? It's an EV.
So isn't that mismarketed?
Well, yeah, I guess. It's a label.
Turbo now doesn't mean turbocharged, it just means top of the line?
Yeah, it means top trumps.
So
it means I've got something with...
Mark, you have to have the best of the best, and that has to be a turbo.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the problems with the Porsche world now, is that, as we said earlier on, people buy these cars on the basis of having to have the newest, the most expensive, the biggest brake horsepower, the highest top end. That's not what these cars are about. I mean, saying that, this was the fastest production car in the world when it was launched in 75, right? So there was an element of that, but now...
ironically, it wasn't the first production turbocharged car available. BMW being with a punch in 2000.
But it was known as the fastest car. Yeah. But most of us that like the old stuff, the air-cooled stuff, we definitely don't buy these cars because they're the fastest cars in the world, right? We buy them for character.
Well, you're talking about a consumer who's having to have the latest, greatest, whatever whammy thing is probably new to the Porsche world.
Because of how we deal with phones, it's the same thing. I've got an iPhone 14, now I have to have a 15. The 16 comes out, I'm still on 11. The 16 comes out, we have to have a 16. It's like, it's
keeping up with the Joneses.
It's a consumer obsession, and I think that's where big manufacturers have gone. Maybe that's back to the point. That's why people love the old stuff so much, because it doesn't matter about, it being the quickest away from the lights or the fastest in top end terms. It's about how it feels.
It's all about engagement and covering the senses.
Yeah, visceral, raw.
Like, who really needs launch control on a GT3 RS?
No, I know.
Right?
Some people would be surprised, Magnus, that you have got water-cooled cars. I mean, you're known as a kind of what I would say is a purist. So, short wheelbase.
I'm known as a purist, truth be told.
Well, I don't know, but
I think I'm more known as an outlaw than a purist.
Yeah, I guess. Well, no, you're an outlaw in terms of your mods, but I guess a purist in terms of, traditional old 911 starting with kind of 64, 65 stuff, of which, of course, you've got a lot. But yeah, it's Yeah, just
well, talk about early stuff. This here is the 310th 911 ever built. This is one of the first half dozen cars ever delivered to Brumos Porsche.
So a US car?
US car.
Not European.
In 64, Porsche made 232 examples of the 64 model year 911.
Yeah.
Didn't arrive onto the US shores really as a model till late 64 as a 65 model year.
Yeah.
This is the 310th 911 ever made. At one time I had 5 of the first 1,000, including a 64. For me, I like to collect the beginning. So to me, it has to be the beginning of that model. Hence, early 911, first year turbo. My 928 is a 77. It's the first year of the 928. So I'm all about the beginning of it. You know, some may say the later models are better, but to me, I like the beginning. I like to experience variety. Yeah. Like here, there's three liter turbos, but no two of them drive the same.
Yeah, and we can't be in this particular room without talking about this car. This is
71 911T.
Well, inarguably your most famous vehicle, right? The car that's been immortalised by Hot Wheels. So 911T, but you've done what to it? What are the modifications?
This is a 71 911T, which today is 53 years old. I've owned it since 1999. I bought it at the Pomona swap meet. So I've owned it 25 years, almost half of its life. Within the first year, I'd added genuine RS flares and sort of did what everyone did back then. You weld on some RS flares, put on a fiberglass RS front bumper, and put on a ducktail, and you've got a 73 RS looking Carrera. The car has evolved over time. In 2002, I took my aggressive street driving to the track, joined the Porsche Owners Club, and did hundreds of track days over the next 5, 6, 7 years in this car.
In this?
All those plaques that you saw on the wall behind my desk from 20 years ago were in this car.
And what's the engine?
Well, it's gone through several. It currently has a 2.8 litre twin plug motor in the back of it. It's, by today's standards, you know, it's somewhat obsolete in the sense of it's still running old torsion bar setup. It doesn't have any of the latest, greatest whammy stuff. This is a twin plug 2.8 litre, probably in this trim, pumping out about 240 horsepower. Car weighs a little over 2,200 pounds. It's rolling on 22 and 28 millimeter torsion bars, adjustable spring plates. But the sum of its parts of this car is nothing special. I've owned it 25 years. It's done hundreds of track days. It's a streetable track car, but it's not like it raced Daytona, went to Le Mans and Sebring and stuff like that. But it's come relatable to a lot of people because it was built over time. This wasn't a high dollar bill, let's throw money at it. It's still a streetable track car.
No, but it's known, it's iconic, isn't it?
Well, I think the point I'm making here is it's iconic because it's been built over time with the purpose of being a streetable track car.
Yeah.
And everything I always talk about is it's about smiles per mile and memorable moments. Yeah. This has that in boatloads. It's your favorite pair of old shoes, your favorite pair of jeans. Yes, there's 8 different models of Hot Wheels in it. There's a Nike sneaker, it's in the Need for Speed video game, it's in the CSR.
It's almost like a sub-brand, so Magnus Walker being a brand, but 277 is its own brand?
I never look at things as brands. It's a car, definitely it's the car I'm most identifiable with. You know, here's an article from Total 911, came out in 2011, before the Urban Outlaw film even came out. Here's 277 with an IROC tail. So, you know, this is the car that is ingrained in my DNA. Yeah. This Porsche thing for me is not a fashion statement that I'm going to grow out of. Like I said, I fell in love with Porsche when I was 10. I'm now approaching 57. So that's 47 years of being in this thing, right? Like I say, it gets in your soul, it's a DNA.
But you do sell a car every now and again.
Occasionally.
Yeah, I think you had a green turbo similar to that one, and you sold that, I think. One of your
Ironically,
cars...
that was at the Luft und Wasser event you went to the other day.
Oh, was it?
It was
under the new ownership.
Yeah, new owner.
And you also sold, so in Britain, one of your STRs just sold through collecting cars, which made good money actually. So I think you're pretty well known for those.
If you talk about that car, so back to, this is old news. This is the STR on the cover of Road and Track when Porsche was celebrating the 911 at 50. The 911 is now 61 years old.
Yeah.
So 11 years ago, this car was on the cover of Road and Track for the 50th anniversary of everything talking about the 911. Here it is, cover of Total 911 magazine. That's that's 2013.
Mr. Lee Sibley, the editor of that magazine, will be very, very happy that you're giving him a shout out.
Yeah, here you go, to Lee Sibley. So yeah, I sold that car at the Gooding auction in Monterey in 2013, 11 years ago.
Can I ask why you sold it?
You know, at the time, You know, I actually sold more cars than I do now. I built these sort of sport purpose 3-double track cars. For me, it was all about the build, the project. You know, the inspiration there was combining the R and the ST together, hence STR. And I built
the R being
quite a
probably
few
the
of those.
rarest 911 ever. 15 cars?
No, they built 20 of them and 4 of them were prototypes. So if
Yeah.
you want to talk about the R, 64 911 came out. 65, you've got the likes of Vic Elford, you know, they're going racing, they're doing the Monte Carlo Rally. By 67, Porsche had taken the 130 horsepower 2-liter and developed the S, 160 horsepower. Now, you want to talk about the first Holy Grail 911, it's a 67S. So 67, if we walk this way, was the year that Porsche's getting serious about sports car racing.
Yeah.
So they developed the 911R, lightweight. They made 4 prototypes of them based on 67S chassis numbers. And then 20 production cars were actually based on a 68 VIN number, but labeled 67R. 20 of those were built. A lot of my inspiration comes from the original 67R.
Is that because it's the year of your birth, do you think?
No, it's because
mine.
that was Porsche's first sport purpose outright built car, where they'd taken that 2-liter motor from 130 horsepower to 210.
And it was built for lightness, right?
Well, it was built to compete, and it became a lightweight car. Fiberglass fenders, fiberglass hood. But the real key to that car was 210 horsepower in a car that weighed about 1,800 pounds. It was actually a giant killer, which never reached its entire success because it wasn't homologated into a certain category. But without the R, there would never have been the 68 TR, which led to the 1970 ST, which ultimately led to the 73 RS and RSR.
Which then led to the 964 RS and arguably the 996 GT3. Can we extend it that far?
Well,
and now to the modern day 992 GT3 RS maybe?
Sure, if you want to jump 20 years ahead and miss out on the 74 3-liter Carrera and the 934 and the 935 turbocharged cars.
But the point being the 911R was
SCRS.
the embryo of streetable race cars for Porsche, really.
Yeah,
it was the beginning, wasn't
yeah,
it?
I mean, yeah, for sure. But without the 74, 75 turbo, which was built to homologate the 934, there would have been no turbocharged car.
Yeah.
So you kind of hung up on a 964, I think, for some reason.
Because I think, in my view, it's... And I was going to ask you this question, which one would you have if you only had to have one car? And you probably won't want to answer that. If I was asked that question,
Yeah.
I will ask you to see. If I was asked that question, I'd have a 964. The reason being, I think all round, as an air-cooled car with coil spring suspension, great chassis, usability and speed, and it still has the visceral, raw character of a traditional 911. To me, the 964 is the car that, if I could only have one, that's what I would have. You?
277.
That if you had one car, that'd be it.
That'd be it.
Wow. And why? Just because it's iconic to you in terms of
I've
emotion?
owned it 25 years, it ticks all the boxes, it's a flat foot car, it's a power to weight ratio car, it's a comfort car, it's in my DNA.
And it's cool, right? It's
964, this is cool, this is my 1990 964. This car actually has more mods than any other car I've built.
I can say you've done a lot to this. I've seen videos on this. So what have you done?
Well, the goal of this car, the 964, obviously is a platform that's been highly modified, backdated, updated, wide-bodied. My goal to the 964 was to do something no one else had done. Keep all the 964 DNA intact, but change absolutely everything about the car. So from the front bumper, real subtle, there's no license plate recess. You look at the hood, that's been channeled from 23 inch down to 12. You look at
so
the
these
roof.
so these bevels here are shallower.
Well, the shallower and narrower.
Yeah.
That's a 12 inch channel. You look here, this is a 22, 23 inch channel.
Yeah.
So the subtleties here, the goal with this 964 was to combine everything Porsche had ever done from a 356 through a roof Yellowbird and a Sport Classic. So talk about roof Yellowbird, you know, rain gutter delete. Talk about Sport Classic influences, but I did things that had never been done. Individual steel die-cut louvered fenders. I teamed up with Rod Emery. These are all individually done. You've got to remember, this is before the carbon fiber insert on a GT3 RS. No one had done ever on a steel fender individually stamped die-cut louvered dies.
And why? And what's the inspiration for the louvers?
The inspiration here was to do something that hadn't been done. I've been doing louvered deck lids on my 911s for a long time. Movers are nothing new. They've been around 100 years. They've been on 356s, but they were never on 911s.
Purely aesthetic?
No, cooling, obviously air's coming out. Aesthetic is a big part of it, but obviously we're allowing air and pressure and heat to come out of there. So not purely form, it's form and function. But this was pretty easy, flat hot rod die. I wanted to up my own game with the 964. Ironically, the first ones we did were on the 67S here. That was done back in 2011.
So this is the first one?
First one.
And I read somewhere, or watched somewhere, that you do them, you fashion them yourself?
No, well, I'll tell you the story. I teamed up with Rod Emery, who had to scan the fender, make a die, and then this is individually, first of all, there's no center line, so you've got to score a center line, measure very accurately, drill a hole, slit a hole, turn the fender upside down, and individually stamp it out. So that became a signature touch here. A little bit like the through the fender gas filler cap.
So I've never seen this before.
Right.
On any 911.
That's just never been done.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's done this, center
Yeah.
hood filler.
Especially your friends at Singer.
And that's great, super racy, but there's nothing unique about that. Nothing unique. It's been around 50 odd years. What was done here was relatively straightforward and simple. And simplicity is often the key. We just welded up the fender flap, gas flap filler cap, and then fabricated a new filler cap, radiused it, extended the nozzle into the original tank, which didn't change position, and Bob's your uncle, we're filling it through the fender.
And what's the motor?
Well, before we get to that, let's keep going on body changes. Rain gutter delete, steel channeled roof, rolled tucked flares, 911R inspired turn signals, which have never been put on a 964. But to answer your question on the motor, this is a 993 3.8 RS spec motor in the back of it, built by BBI. This car weighs 2,540 pounds as you see it. It's rolling on KW coilover suspension, Brembo club race brakes, and my own Outlaw 17-inch wheels.
So these, yeah, I'm going to say these
shot
are
in sticky Pirelli Trofeo R rubber.
famously your designer wheel, right?
And then if you look inside, it's stripped out.
RS door cards, or type door cards.
The real interesting thing here, RS door cards is nothing special, but manual windows on a 964 is something special.
And again, for weight saving, or just because it's a hark back to cars of the
Weight
past?
saving's irrelevant of this. This shows how Porsche DNA has not changed. From 64 all the way up to the 993, the interior door pressing on the skin hasn't changed on the interior of the door. So what that meant is I could pull a manual window crank and glass out of a 65 912 and it dropped right in.
Wow.
And the 4 holes that bolt up the window crank, even though all 964s have electric windows, were still inside the interior door.
A car that's 30 years younger, 25 years younger.
This shows how Porsche engineered everything and didn't change things that didn't need to be changed. The doors are interchangeable. Later ones may have the crash brace crossbar beam in it, but the interior pressing is the same.
Yeah.
So it's not about saving weight, it's about doing something that hadn't been done before. Back to me getting annoyed with my plastic switch on the 991 Turbo S. Manual window, you just wind them up or down. Electric window switches, things jam brake.
Yeah, switches go, motors go.
Simplifying stuff. Now, talking about simplifying, if you come around here and shoot through that door, I'll open up and show you a couple of trick details. This is all simplified. No radio, no AC, no heater vent,
But
no
that's
nothing.
just steel, so there's no covering to the dash or anything. It's just, that's just steel, right?
Yeah. Well, look how clean it is.
Yeah, yeah. Dials, standard 964 dials.
Yeah. Now, feel the headliner here. Come all the way over to where my
Did you delete the roof, the sunroof?
sunroof delete, which everyone does, but they just do, oh, I'll do a RS America thing, right? Sunroof delete. This is a channeled roof.
So
Look
it's
at
a
the roof.
new, so it's a new panel.
It's a whole new steel panel, not carbon. But if you feel the headliner, you still feel, come all the way over here. This is leather.
Yeah. Pressed on, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the brake horsepower?
I
Roughly?
never dynoed it. I mean, conservatively,
3?
yeah, ish.
It's a very cool looking thing, isn't it? It just shows you, can I just say, we were talking about Singer earlier. I'd love your opinion on Singer. Singer obviously used the 964 as their donor car, as do people like Theon in Britain and many others. This just shows you what a modded 964 could look like. I think some people will say that this in some way looks better, that maybe the Singer's a bit over-engineered. Maybe that's how they justify their big sticker prices. They're $500,000 upwards, or now $2 to $3 million for a DLS. What do you think of Singer?